Hi, I'm John DeVore. Welcome to the DeVore Fidelity YouTube channel. Today's a Monkeyhaus tour, and I'll be talking about the gear here, specifically the turntables. And more than that, I wanted to go into sort of a personal history for me of turntables. I've owned a lot of them over the years. Actually, the turntables and the analog front ends that I've owned since the mid-90s have all been either heavily modified by me or completely built by me, using a variety of parts, some homemade or built here in the factory, some reconstituted from other manufacturers such as VPI, Roksan, Well Tempered, Garrard. Most of you know that I am a huge vinyl fan. I love LPs. It is hands down my favorite recorded music format. I love, I have a real affection for cassettes. I do enjoy the simplicity and ease of streaming music off of my hard drive, but the tangibility, the beauty, the process, the physicality, and yes, the sound of vinyl is still to this day my favorite source. And sonics aside, it's really no great mystery why vinyl is so lovable. I mean, the packaging, in addition to just the sound, the packaging is incredible. This is a classic example of great packaging where we have multiple things happening in windows here from Led Zeppelin. We have colossal fold-out vinyl. These are both classic examples. We have amazing newer examples. This is from Soviet France, and it is a piece of steel with beautiful records inside. Or even unbelievable, luxurious reissues. Here we have an incredible velvet box set of Breeder's Last Splash for their 25th anniversary release. And these are amazing packages. They sound great. They're a joy to use. They're a joy to play. In the beginning of the story, vinyl was the high-end source. I mean, my first records and my first turntable were in the 70s. My record collection still contains a bunch of the records that I remember having as some of my very first records. And I remember playing them on my very first turntable, which was a white plastic affair that could close up into a little briefcase thing. I remember playing a lot of records on that thing. My first component turntable was a BIC turntable that I had for a number of years. The turntable I got after that was persuaded a little bit by the sort of high-tech ideas in the early 80s, and it was a linear tracking JVC. It was a close and play style, meaning it had no tone arm. It had a cartridge mounted on a track that was mounted to the inside of the lid. So you put the record on, close the lid, and using buttons you could scan the cartridge left and right and come down on the track, or approximately on the track that you wanted. Little P-mount cartridge in there, Audio-Technica. Not long after I had that, I got a Bang & Olufsen RX2, and I got that not because it was gorgeous, although it is a gorgeous turntable and extremely easy to use, but because it sounded fantastic. It absolutely creamed the JVC sonically, and was better than the BIC as well. From there, at that point, it was at the end of the 80s, and I started working in New York at a used hi-fi shop on Broadway, Stereo Exchange. And I grabbed a really cool turntable that I fell in love with, a Yamaha PF 800, which at the time a lot of people sort of called the poor man's Oracle. It had a very Oracle Delphi style. It was a sprung sub-chassis turntable, and it was sprung from 3 towers that were covered by these beautiful bronze cups. And it was a great looking turntable and a very good sounding turntable. The cartridge that I had on that one was a Shure V15, and that was the last stock, unmodified, unmolested turntable I have ever had. Everything since then has been either heavily modified or built up from parts from either various manufacturers or things that I machined in-house, or some weird Frankenstein mishmash of those things. Starting with stuff, simple weird kludges, like I had for a few years I had a Rega Planer 3 with a well-tempered arm mounted on it, which neither of those two original designers would ever approve of, but I kind of loved it, maybe partly because of that. This was also around the time that I definitively proved, at least to myself and to everyone who was around, the superiority of vinyl playback over the state-of-the-art digital playback of the time. So this was sometime in the early 90s. Nirvana Nevermind had come out recently, and we had this. I had the CD at Stereo Exchange, and we played it. I demoed with it quite a bit. I loved demoing with Lithium, and so when the vinyl came out, which came out a little after the CD, I grabbed the vinyl, brought it into Stereo Exchange, grabbed a few other sales guys, and we went into one of the sound rooms. We put the CD in the very best digital playback we had at the time. It was a top of the line Wadia stack, and then I put the vinyl down on a fully loaded VPI HW19 Mark IV, maybe, with possibly a Wheaton triplanar tone arm and a Vanden Hull Grasshopper cartridge. We played Smells Like Teen Spirit first on the CD, and then we played it on the vinyl, and it was the first time I had heard the vinyl. And there were about 5 of us in the sound room. Only 2 of us sitting down, the rest standing up and around. And by 10 seconds into the first verse, everyone was looking at each other with their mouths gaping open. And we realized that for the first time ever, we understood Kurt Cobain's lyrics. It was so much better. Not only was it far more detailed and articulate, so that we could hear the lyrics in the song, but it had more impact. It felt like it had a broader bandwidth. It was just better in every way. And I have since then had quite a few experiences like that, including pretty controlled A/B comparisons like that. Digital has come a long way, but you know what? Vinyl has come a long way actually since the 90s as well, surprisingly enough for how mature a technology it is. So my turntable rigs started to diverge quite a bit, and I started to experiment a lot with them. And around this time, I had already been building speakers myself for a long time, but I started to get deeper into it. And I started to get deeper into customizing and ordering custom drivers for my speakers, and really sort of diving into the way that woofers and tweeters worked with their moving coils and their fixed magnets. And I started to really appreciate the similarities. In a sense, a hi-fi system playing records with a pair of moving coil speakers in a room is doing nothing but translating the vibrations pressed in the vinyl surface into vibrations pressed into the air in the listening room. And so everything between that cartridge with its tiny, tiny moving coils translating into electricity, everything in between that and the speakers, which is taking that electrical signal and then retransforming it back into vibrations. Everything in between is basically just trying to smooth the way for the music to get from that cartridge to the speakers. And I loved that idea back then. And so I really started focusing on seeing how what I could do to the analog front end could change the way things sounded, just as the things that I was doing to my speaker designs would change the way things sounded. You know, I just had tons of experiments. I had these big birthday cake layer plinths. I had massive, heavy, lead-weighted platters, big outboard motors, tiny little suspended motors. I used mechanisms from old parts from VPI upgrades that I would use and I would change around and refurbish. I used well-tempered parts. I used Roksan parts, Xerxes bearings and platters and motors. It was a beautiful system. Various Garards, including my beloved heavily modified Garard 401, which has been in a lot of different plinths. A lot of direct drive experiments with my Technics SP10 Mark II. And one of the things that gradually evolved with all these experiments is a interchangeable standardized arm board mount, which all of my current plinths now share. So I can very easily swap out tone arms. I've got Eminent Technology, I've got a couple of different SMEs. I've got an SME V12 and a classic 1990s SME 45i. I have a couple of modified Ortofon RF 309s. I have stock and modified EMT 997 tone arms, the banana tone arms, and a couple of well-tempereds and a number more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. But the end result is a number of tone arms that I can pop onto any of the various plinth and motor systems that I'm using at any given time in order to be able to use the various cartridges that require different things. So the two SMEs are used with some of the more modern cartridges. I have my most recent cartridge acquisition was actually a barter for a pair of orangutans, and that's my beloved Koetsu Coralstone Platinum. Just a truly astonishing cartridge. But another modern cartridge that I absolutely love is my Dynavector XV1T, which is just incredibly dynamic, beautiful sounding, and I've taken that to a couple of hi-fi shows, so some of you may have also heard that in my room. But then I also have a few of the playback unit type cartridges from EMT, Ortofon, and some interchangeable head shells that has some other standard mount cartridges on them. And so I'm able to sort of intermix all of these different things. I have to say, since I got my EMT preamp with the variable analog playback curves, 99% of the time, the turntable that's in play has to be able to play 78s. So that means it's either my Garard 401, which is in the system currently, and that has been heavily modified. That has an upgraded idler wheel. It has a Shindo bearing and platter on it, or it is my Technics SP10, both of which will play all three speeds. Thank you very much for watching. Please support any local record stores you may have because it's tough for them right now. And if you do buy records online, I always try to check out Bandcamp first. More of the proceeds go directly to the musicians. But if not, there are still local-ish record stores that sell online and keep vinyl alive. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.